In February of 1981, Vincent Germano purchased 3.7 acres of prime commercial real estate in Oklahoma City. There he built the first phase of the American Inn, which he and his son Wayne operated after it opened for business that December. In January 1985, the bank holding American Inn's mortgage, knowing that Vincent was about to pay off his note on a property worth nearly twice the loan amount, ignored an agreement made by the Bethany Bank president and foreclosed on the American Inn. Assisted by Oklahoma City insiders that included attorneys, judges, and the local press, Vincent Germano lost everything: his motel, his savings, his good credit, and his health. Now 89, a widower, and living on Social Security, Vincent continues his fight for justice. This is his story. Born and raised in Poughkeepsie, New York, Vincent served in World War II with his 9 other brothers. In 1948, he married Sophie, and together they raised a family and built a prosperous construction business. Arranging financing to buy property and build on it was nothing new for Vincent. He'd been doing it successfully for decades. When he located some commercial real estate in Oklahoma City that seemed perfect for a motel that he and his son Wayne planned to build and operate, it was business as usual. Purchase the property, obtain a construction loan, then pay off the construction loan with a loan from a permanent lender. Adding $375,000 from his savings to a $800,000 construction loan, Vincent purchased the property and built Phase 1 of the American Inn, which opened for business on December 16, 1981. Consisting of 54 rental units, an office, laundry, manager's apartment, and a hot water system with a capacity to accommodate the rental units that were scheduled to be added in Phase 2, American Inn's occupancy rate far exceeded the national average for similar motels.
This property was right next to a McDonald's, a large AT&T manufacturing plant. It was right on I-40 and Council Road. There was 2 multi-million-dollar truck stops nearby. This was a 3.7 acres of prime commercial real estate.
It was, as Vincent had foreseen, an ideal location. Appraised at $1.5 million, almost double the amount of the construction loan, Vincent looked forward to building Phase 2. First, however, he would borrow funds from a permanent lender to pay off the construction loan. Family-owned and well-established in the community, Bank of Bethany knew the local market well. And they certainly knew a good deal when they saw one. A bank senior vice president made a sound case to Bethany Bank's board for lending Vincent $900,000 to pay off the first construction loan. On March 29, 1983, the loan was granted, which, as it happened, was the largest loan the bank had ever made. By June of 1984, Vincent calculated that if he secured a $2 million loan from a lender with greater resources and at better terms than he had with Bethany Bank, he could pay off Bethany Bank and the Phase 2 construction loan, plus recoup some of the savings he had put into the business. Pursuing that end, Vincent entered into a verbal agreement with Peter G. Pierce Sr., Bethany Bank president, chairman of the board and majority stockholder, to make partial payments on his loan until a remortgage loan was obtained from another lender. On December 4th, per their agreement, Vincent hand-delivered a scheduled partial payment and advised Pierce Sr. that he had a $1,950,000 loan pending from Tinker Investment and Mortgage Corporation, which would close in the next few weeks. With the Tinker loan assured, Pierce Sr. told Vincent he didn't need to continue making partial payments and to bring Tinker's letter of commitment to him when issued. The letter of commitment was, in fact, issued on January 28th, which Vincent personally delivered to Bethany Bank. The only problem was that on January 4th, Bethany Bank's plan to separate Vincent from his motel had been put into motion. Peter G. Pierce III, Bethany Bank's senior vice president, son of bank president Pierce Sr., and a licensed Oklahoma attorney, also served as the bank's general counsel. He apparently saw his father's verbal agreements with Vincent as an open door for the bank to make a lot more money than if Vincent just paid off his note to them. And when you get right down to it, weren't those Texas-based Germanos interlopers anyway? Pierce III's plan was simple. Since his father and Vincent had only made verbal agreements, he would claim the period of partial payments along with the cessation of partial payments as grounds for accelerating the loan and foreclosing on American Inn. So on January 4th, 1985, without notice of default, Pierce filed for foreclosure in district court. This effectively put the brakes on the Tinker loan. As Pierce well knew, a condition for this type of loan was that there could be no legal action pending against the property.
We obtained the plans for the Phase 2, and we're about to construct it when the First National Bank of Bethany, now First Bethany Bank and Trust, alleged that we had defaulted on its note. And the interesting part of that is we have paid $19,500 for a remortgage commitment to pay with which to pay them off in full. And the bank, with full knowledge that we had this commitment which was to be issued after the Christmas holidays, filed foreclosure on January 4, 1985. And actually, the bank, through its insider lawyer, Peter Pierce III, prosecuted the bank's foreclosure to knowingly prevent closing of the Tinker mortgage obtained from Tinker Investment and Mortgage Corporation.
Vincent retained attorney Alan Reeves to take all actions necessary to keep the bank from snatching his motel. For his part, with the Tinker letter of commitment in hand, Vincent personally met with Pierce III, asking him to stop foreclosure action, which would allow the Tinker loan to be closed and the Bethany Bank note paid in full. Of course, Vince's request fell on deaf ears because that was exactly opposite the direction Pierce had plotted. My marginal orders, Pierce told Vincent, are to proceed with a foreclosure. Vincent's attorney, Reeves, proved to be exceptionally helpful, to Bethany Bank that is. Reeves failed to oppose the reassigning of the case from the first appointed judge to Judge James Blevins, who had connections with Pierce. He failed to demand a trial by jury, which would level the playing field for Vincent. He failed to mount a vigorous defense by challenging statements Bethany Bank officers had made in their affidavits. He also failed to move for a temporary restraining order so Vincent could close the Tinker deal. And finally, Reeves failed to file an answer to Pierce's motion on March 15th for summary judgment on the foreclosure. How convenient for Pierce and Bethany Bank. On March 21st, at Vincent's request, Tinker extended their letter of commitment through April 30. Pierce Sr. and other Bethany Bank officers were duly made aware of this extension. Then on April 4th, a seemingly more cooperative Pierce Sr. agreed to cease the foreclosure action so the Tinker loan could be closed. Hardly had Vincent given a sigh of relief when a couple of hours later, Pierce Sr., via Rick Germano, the attorney he had hired to put that agreement in writing, advised Vincent that Pierce Sr. had had a change of heart. In fact, the foreclosure would continue. Vincent saw Pierce III's fingerprints all over his father's flip-flop. Vincent demanded that the less than helpful Reeves file a counterclaim to the bank's foreclosure action that very day. The following day, April 5th, Vincent, his son Wayne, and Reeves attended a hearing with Judge Blevins. Well, that's to say Reeves attended the hearing. Instructing Vincent and Wayne to remain outside in the hallway, only Reeves attended the hearing, during which he finalized the bank's foreclosure proceedings by signing a judgment against American Inn before Judge Blevins.
When they were prosecuting the foreclosure, they literally refused to close the Tinker Investment Mortgage Corporation commitment, for which we paid $19,500.
Right?
They literally refused to pay it, to cooperate. That's our attorneys and Pierce. It was their responsibility to close that commitment to pay off the bank. And they refused to do it. Not only did they do it, they did it under color of law.
Enough was enough. Vincent and Wayne went directly from the courthouse to the U.S. Attorney's office and met with Assistant U.S. Attorney Eleanor Thompson. She recommended that they hire attorney Alan Durbin, a senior shareholder of a powerful Oklahoma City law firm. Durbin was hired by Vincent that day and Reeves fired. Surely Durbin would rein in this renegade bank's grab for American Inn, or would he?
Wayne and I went to the U.S. attorney and complained about the perjury of legal instruments through which the bank obtained a judgment by default on its foreclosure. And the second attorney actually compounded the first attorney's fraud and in refusing to move the court to require the bank to tender its papers so that we could close the mortgage.
Realizing he was always odd man out, Vincent continued to push for a trial by a jury of his peers. Of course, this was one part of due process that Pierce wanted to avoid. On April 8th, Pierce moved for summary judgment against American Inn's counterclaim filed on April 4th, claiming that the Tinker letter of commitment had expired, even though he knew the commitment had been extended through April 30. One guess who failed to respond to that motion and ultimately allowed the appeal time to expire. Mr. Durbin, it seemed, had the same propensity for assisting Bethany Bank that Reeves had.
Durbin did not answer the second motion for summary judgment filed by the bank's attorney, Peter G. Pierce III. So that became another judgment against us after Mr. Durbin obtained my father's signature on a journal entry of judgment against the counterclaim.
On April 23rd, Ed Phelps, president of Tinker Investment, once again extended the letter of commitment at Vince's request. Only this time the terms were less than favorable. Out of time and with few options, Vincent had little choice but to accept the new terms. On May the 2nd, Durbin told Vincent that Pierce would allow the Tinker loan to close provided Vincent signed the journal entry of judgment against American Inn's counterclaim, effectively closing the counterclaim. Hesitant and highly skeptical, Vincent agreed, but only on the strict condition that Durbin would keep the document in his possession until after the Tinker loan was closed. Somehow, and who knows how these things happen, the document quickly ended up in Pierce's hands, who took it directly to Judge Blevins. Ever cooperative, the judge signed it in his chambers, ex parte, meaning without all parties present. One could hardly imagine a more helpful team of insiders. Still, from Pierce's point of view, that pesky Vincent remained a threat because he still had a small window to close the Tinker deal. Certainly, if the public knew that Tinker was about to lend a large sum of money to a business in foreclosure, eyebrows, along with some serious questions, would be raised. On June 3rd, the ever-creative Pierce called a reporter acquaintance at the Daily Oklahoman, who in turn called Tinker and asked some questions. Coincidentally, Tinker Investment's remortgage commitment to American Inn was canceled that same day.
This is Peter Pierce III, attorney at this time. His 1985 Oklahoma District Court timesheets in support of his motion for attorney's fees in his sham foreclosure action. As you can see here, the entry, Bob Vanderwater, Daily Oklahoma Reporter, June 3rd. Next, this is Peter Pierce III, attorney, Daily Oklahoma Bar timesheets, or daily timesheets, which he submitted to the Oklahoma Bar Association in support of no disciplinary action to be taken against him. June 3rd, reporter contact entirely omitted.
By the way,
and it's even obvious, you can see the way he just pasted.
So far, Pierce's plan was running smoother than a Swiss watch. Of course, he couldn't take all the credit. The harmony between Reeves, Durbin, Judge Blevins, and the reporter was as good as any barbershop quartet. From this point on, justice only became more elusive for Vincent. After filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy, Vince's attempt to remain debtor in possession and execute a plan to pay off Bethany Bank was blocked by Pierce and friends. As it turned out, bankruptcy judge Bohannon just happened to be an ex-partner of Durbin's law firm. Though still receiving payments from the law firm, Judge Bohannon refused to remove himself from the case.
Here is the order that bankruptcy judge Richard Bohannon issued denying my father's request that he disqualify himself.
He even appointed Durbin and Pierce, who had already collaborated against Vincent's interests, to represent American Inn and Bank of Bethany respectively. The hometown boys were in full control. After Judge Bohannon ruled in favor of the bank, Vincent was obliged to appeal the ruling at the federal court for the Western District of Oklahoma. The only problem with the appeal was that Judge Bohannon's father, Luther Bohannon, was the senior judge of that federal court. It appeared that Oklahoma justice was strictly a friends and family affair. From district court to bankruptcy court to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and including several other court actions, Vincent employed attorneys from 9 different Oklahoma law firms. Mostly by design, but with a couple by sheer incompetence, each attorney helped Pierce's case in one way or another. Finally, Vincent appealed to the United States Supreme Court, which refused to hear the case.
And nobody's listening. There's no shame, there's no outrage by officers of the court at the highest levels.
Today, decades later, Vincent continues to seek compensation for the theft of his motel. But, just as Vincent points out, his battle is not just for himself and his family. It's for everyone who has ever fought or ever will fight for justice against people willing and capable of perverting the American legal system. Sophie, Vincent's lifelong love and partner, passed away in 2011. In her memory, he fights on.